Swiftism has gotten completely out of hand. At this point, the worship of Taylor Swift by her fan base has become an ideology and a religion. It is basically to the point where she's like the Prophet Muhammad or Jesus in the eyes of her followers. Like she's this figure that you can't criticize. And if anybody criticizes her, it is an attack on her entire fan base. Not only that, but it's an attack on all women. Like there's this idea that she's like the ambassador of womanhood and she represents all women. And if you criticize Taylor Swift, you are sexist and you hate all women. It's gotten ridiculous. And I don't deny maybe at some point men have been like this too. Like maybe at one point Eminem was basically seen as the ambassador for all white men. And to be honest, it was cringe then and it's cringe now. Nobody should idolize anybody to this extent, especially like pop singers or rappers or whatever. Like, there is no musician out there who has never made a bad album or a bad song, or at very least a mediocre one. Like, I would say Alcest is a band that I like. They've never made a bad album or a bad song, but they've made maybe a few that could be considered mediocre. I wouldn't say there's anybody who has never made anything at very least mediocre. But Taylor Swift's fans will fervently insist that everything she touches turns to gold. She's never made a bad song, she's never made a bad album or even a mediocre one. Everything that she's created is pure brilliance, and you cannot criticize Taylor Swift. Not only that, but you're sexist if you do. And the implication is that people who dislike Taylor Swift don't like any female musicians at all. And I mean, maybe that's true for some, but in my case, like, I'm a huge fan of Bjork. Like, I think her album Vespertine is an amazing album in particular. Also, Homogenic is a pretty good album. I also say I like a lot of music by Tori Amos, even though I disapprove of her Satanism. PJ Harvey, Kylie Minogue, Portishead. They're a band that have a female lead singer, a trip hop band. I like them. And I mean, there's others too that have some good stuff, like, you know, Heart, Kate Bush, Lana Del Rey, Pastel Ghost. Like, there's plenty of female artists out there who, you know, whose material I appreciate, and some of whom I'd even say I'm a big fan of. But again, this idea that, like, oh, if you criticize Taylor Swift, you're sexist. And it's like, well, I guess there is an element of criticism of female behavior in it, because I would say women more than men, and I mean, all human beings have the tendency to do this, but I would say women even more than men on average is like to gravitate toward groupthink, herd mentality, following the crowd, following what's popular. I mean, again, all human beings can do this to an extent. I'm not saying men are immune from it, but I would say women on average do it more. And in fact, this has pretty much been proven through plenty of analysis by researchers looking into human behavior. And it is adaptive to some extent. Like, women are the nurturers, the nurturer of society. And, like, I mean, yes, being that way does mean that women have more of a tendency to be empathetic, which also means they have more of a tendency to strive for social acceptance and to strive to be in line with their culture, their society. It's the same way, like, a lot of people say the same women who right now are fervent social justice warriors would have been equally fervent members of the NSDAP if they'd been alive in 1930s Germany. It's true. Now, again, there are exceptions. There are individual women who aren't like this. Like Jane Jacobs, for instance, very much bucked the herd mentality of her time by writing some of the most seminal works of new urbanism against suburban sprawl and against car culture. She was not somebody who followed the herd mentality. Okay, so obviously there are exceptions. And again, musicians themselves, like I could say Bjork is one who does not follow the herd mentality. Her music is very original, very unique, very creative. And I'm not saying Taylor Swift has no talent, but I'm saying she's fairly generic. her music is fairly generic. There's nothing groundbreaking about it. It's not that fundamentally different from like the pop music of, say, Lady Gaga or Katy Perry or many other pop singers before her or during the same time as her. There's nothing amazing about Taylor Swift. Like, she has some decent songs. Like, I think Blank Space and Anti-Hero are both decent pop songs for what it's worth. But I just don't think she or any musician deserves this level of worship. Like you can't criticize them. Like, they're the second coming of Jesus. Like, honestly, it has gotten out of hand. And this idea that like she's like the ambassador of womanhood, or at least of white womanhood, and like she's the ambassador for all white women, and that you just can't criticize her. It's like, this has gotten ridiculous.